My name is Manny, and I have started beekeeping. If you are my English teacher, skip to this part of the video right here, and that will be my more proper capstone project, as we could call it. For the rest of you, keep watching as it is. So, for a little bit of backstory, the entire reason why I started beekeeping is because I watched a YouTube video, much like the one I'm making right now. And the guy I watched, his channel name is Just Alex. Like, Just Alex. Those two words glued together. Here's a screenshot of his channel. Go check him out. Great video quality, amazing editing. It's awesome. So please go check him out. So after I watched his first video of beekeeping, I went, ooh, that's cool. I wish I could do that. Too bad I can't, because I'm just a teenager. I probably have to be an adult to do that, whistle life. And then I thought about it a little bit more, and then went, wait a minute. I could do this. There's no reason why I can't do this. And so that's when I finally decided, hey, I should make a goal for myself to start beekeeping by next summer. And I watched these videos in the winter of 2023, about around Christmas time. So after making that goal for myself, I talked to my parents about it. They liked the idea a lot, and they were fine with it. And so they helped fund some of my stuff until I could pay them back. And so I was looking around for supplies on Amazon and all that type of stuff, and I bought a few things off of Facebook Marketplace, like some new, beautifully made beehive boxes. Like, not the frames inside. I still had to get that separately, but overall, it was a really good price, only about $140. And then I also took a beekeeping course by the bee man of the city, and out of that, I got this fancy little doodad. It's a certificate that I just completed an introductory beekeeping course. You do not need this to do beekeeping. You should do a course to do beekeeping, just to clear up all that confusing stuff that when you run into it will confound you, and you're going to have to do hundreds of hours of research just to discover that it's something that you would have learned in the course that would have an easy fix. And so it's pretty useful. You do want to learn some stuff before getting into it. So once I got all the supplies, like the boxes and the frames, I had to put the frames together. And so I just glued and nailed them together just so that they're extra sturdy. They'll last 5 years, which is how long you usually want to keep them in for a hive. If you usually want to take wooden frames out after about 5 years because they start to get old and they start to rot and they could hold diseases. And so it's best to switch them out every once in a while, just so that they don't fall apart on you. Because it kind of sucks when a clump of bees fall on the ground. They get a bit angry. But another thing is that I had to paint the outside of the beehive. You don't paint the inside. Anything that the bees like come into contact with and live in, you don't paint, and so you just leave that. But the outside I had to stain and paint just so that it will last a long time, because I actually want to do this for a bit longer than 1 or 2 years. And then after I put the hive together with the frames, the painted boxes, I was ready to go, and I put it up in my treehouse, actually. My old treehouse that I used to play in as a kid, just because that was a spot out of the way. It was easy to set up an electrical fence around it for the bears. I live in British Columbia. There's a few bears that just wander into the city, because why not? And so after all of that, I finally got the bees, and they came in a very large, fun tube. Cardboard. It came in a cardboard tube. I'm actually gonna grab it right now. 1 second. Okay, here it is. The tube the bees came in It's very large. I am 6'1". This thing is tall. And all the bees were just inside of here. And inside of here was bees and a cage for the queen. Here it is. This is the queen cage. The queen just sits in here. And there was a cork on here. You take out the cork, and then what I did is that I put in a little marshmallow so that the bees could eat through the marshmallow and take her out once they settled into the hive so that they don't fly away with the queen. Now, I did make one tiny mistake when I was transferring the queen into the hive. I dropped the cage because I got stung because I wasn't wearing the proper gloves. And that kinda scared me because I didn't bother looking inside the queen cage to verify if she was alive, or to verify if she was hurt, or I had to make sure everything was fine. That would be the smart thing to do. I didn't do that. I just forgot about it completely, and I just put her inside. And then by the time I remembered, I can't open up the hive for another 5 days to check in on it. Now, happily, she did survive. She did live, but that scared me a fair bit. But the reason why that happened is because the bees got a bit angry because this was in there. When you're pouring the bees out, what you do is that you take the package and you tap it hard so that all the bees fall to the bottom. Then you take the cap off. Then you take the queen out. And because the queen cage is attached to this burlap sack material, the bees really stuck to this. They have really good grip on this. And so as I'm pulling this out, I see this is hanging out. And so I pull the queen out and I'm like, okay, nice. I pull a bit more out. Here's some mite treatment. And then there's already hundreds of bees on here. And I'm like, uh-oh, this is a lot. And I keep pulling and pulling and I'm pulling and I'm pulling. And then by the time it finally comes out, it just drops to the ground because of its weight. And hundreds of bees on the ground. And they're all angry now. And I get stung on my hand, and that's when I drop it. And I might even have some of this recorded. I don't know if I lost the footage or not, but it's probably still there. I find it funny now, but then it was like, oh no, I'm gonna lose my bees already. $300 down the drain. A cardboard tube of bees costs about $300. Now, after I put the bees in, I had to wait 5 days before I could look in the hive so that they could settle in and calm down, and because they were transported from New Zealand, flown over the ocean to Canada, into Alberta, and then somebody from a beekeeper in the city picked up all these packages and drove them all the way to Prince George in British Columbia, and finally was I able to pick up the bees and bring them to my place. So it was a bit of a large and jostling journey for these bees here. But when I finally did check on it, the bees have actually settled in quite nicely. They started building comb, very nice comb too, in the first brood box, which is the larger boxes where you just don't touch the honey that they build in there. Got
a lot of comb on there, and they're filling it with a lot of honey. Oh, there's eggs. I see an egg. There's just bees. Here you can see honey, lots of it. They're making a lot of it. Uh-oh, it's getting a bit windy. I should put this back. Okay. But yes, they're dealing with stuff. That's good. They have eggs, they have pollen.
They built very nice honeycomb on there that was very straight and along the building parameters that you would usually see bees do, which respects bee space, which I had no foundation on these frames. And that's actually very uncommon for them to build it like that without foundation. Obviously, these were older bees that came from another hive, and so they built it the same way that they did in the other hive.
Okay, so I have to wait a couple days before I could actually open up the hive and check on it after moving the package into the box. But we could look at the entrance and my thoughts on it. But yeah, and also I'm allowed to check if the food is being, eaten. That's what I'm gonna do right now mainly, and I might also change your bottom board to a white one. But I think I might also I should leave it for the next couple of days, especially as it warms up, because it worked out for last night and it got pretty cold last night, and so it will probably work out for the next couple of days then. Yeah. Okay. So there they are. They're not too active right now. It's cooling down. And so a couple things I found pretty interesting is how they've been using that more than the main entrance. They preferred using the tiny little one, and then they've also been using that entrance up there that leads to the food, and so it's been pretty interesting to see that. I've been keeping some of this padding on to keep them warm. I'm gonna have to put that one back up, and I got the bottom board. So the bags are mainly to hold up the insulation that I've been putting on just for the nights. It does get to like -1 or 2, and so it's just to make it a bit easier on the bees that just got their new home. So I just do that, make sure it stays. I'm gonna take off the top, hold up, just so that we can see the food. So it's half full now. That's good. They've been eating it. I'm gonna put this back on before they start getting mad, because I don't have my smoker with me right now. There's one buzzing around me. He's a little bit mad. I don't have a proper suit, as you could probably see. I just got the gloves and the hat. The rest is just coveralls and boots. It does work. It's just there's a few small points where they could get in, and so I don't really want to tempt them too much. Yeah, everything has been going pretty well, and also it's nice to see that the bees didn't bother me too much there, and so they're starting to relax a bit, which also makes sense because I don't know, they only got moved from Alberta to British Columbia to my place yesterday, and then I proceed to just dump them into a box that's like completely, well, like they have already been hives before, but like this is pretty like jazzling to them, razzling, whatever the word is. It's pretty crazy, and so they get a little bit defensive, and I find it very funny how the first couple of times I've been checking them out, even though like I felt very relaxed and confident going into this and starting to beekeeping, as I actually got the package, the bees, like I started to actually have my adrenaline go up and stuff like that. And I do have a phobia of wasps, but I have no phobia of bees. But it appears that that same phobia has I still have the fear of being stung. I don't know if that's normal, but I also noticed that like that's why I've also been trying to like sit around them and just listen to them buzz and fly around me, just so that I get a bit more relaxed, and it's been going pretty well. But yeah, now I have to wait until next Thursday, and then I could open up the hive and make sure everything's fine, make sure the queen is fine, because I made the like a very amateur mistake, which I am, but still, like like you're taught this as like a very important thing, where you check on the queen when you get her, because if she's dead, well then you could just get a replacement before all your bees die. So I didn't check on her. Like I saw legs moving around in the cage, but that could have also been her care worker bees, and so I made that mistake. She should be fine. Bees don't show any sign of like, oh no, it's the end of the world type stuff, but also I don't know what to look for. Not to mention, until I open up the hive, we won't know for sure. But then I could just look for eggs, and maybe even look for the queen and look for how the bees are acting. And just in case, my instructor does have some extra queens for the next couple of days, slash week, or two. So I could technically get a replacement if she's dead, but a little mistake. But other than that, I'm pretty happy. But yeah, here's the suit. Here it is. Just coveralls. Apparently I have like a little bit of a gap there in the back where the net mesh meets the coveralls. So that's been the only worrying part. I also got all my tools in the shed. I keep all my stuff in the shed and the closing because if the closing gets stung, then the stinger injects the venom inside of the closing, and then it dries up. I move it, and then there's suddenly all this crusty venom dust in the air that um that causes people to get allergies. Like just by getting stung, you won't develop an allergy. Getting stung, somewhat will also not let you get an allergy. Getting stung a lot will sometimes could get you to develop an allergy. It kind of acts differently, but getting stung is not what develops allergies nearly as much as breathing in the venom dust. And so that's why you all see beekeepers who deal with bees every day. They don't have an allergy, but but somebody else who lives with them will get a bee allergy midway through, like a year into the beekeeper's journey, and even though they never even like touched the bees or they never even got stung the entire time, because the beekeeper was hanging up their like bee suit inside the house and the dust was getting everywhere, then they developed an allergy anyways. And so now this beekeeping hobby for the beekeeper suddenly becomes very lethal to their friend or their family or whatever. And so that's why I'm keeping it in the shed where it's fairly aerated, and not to mention we just don't go in here too much except for grabbing stuff and taking it out because, you know, it's just shed. There's actually a lot of them. They're pretty active today, even despite the, I want to say bad weather, just or generally cloudy. That's a lot of bees. I don't have my full suit on. I'm gonna move to the side. Forgotten about the growing pains of when I was trying to do beekeeping with less of a suit on and get more comfortable working with the bees with less protective gear. And this is just to check food. That's it. I just looked at it, gauged how much there was, and that's all I did there. And I sat there for 2 minutes hyping myself up for that. When making food for bees in spring, it's 1 part sugar, 1 part water. So I just fill up a jar till it's half full with sugar, and then I fill up the other half with water. Hot water makes it a lot easier to stir, and you have to boil out the bleach first. And after that, I mix it up until it's clear. Et puis voilà. La bonne sucre à l'eau pour les abeilles. About now, May finally rolled around the corner and the grass started getting greener and the flowers started blooming on all the trees. And it was very nice. Spring finally started to settle in. package of bees, you get a lot of different breeds of bees. So here, you can see one was like an entirely black bottom, completely black butt, but other ones you see them multicolored, and other ones are bigger than others, which I find pretty interesting. Just take a look. Take a look at that. Oh, it's so much pollen. Look at all it. He's struggling to land. Just getting the smoker fired up here. I've left the bees alone for about a week now. So hopefully they made a lot of comb, and hopefully they spread apart enough so that I could spot and grab the queen, because that's what I was really waiting for, so that they would be more spread apart, so that the queen would be a lot more noticeable instead of in like a bunch of hundreds of bees on very few pieces of comb. Pollen, egg, queen, still alive. On this one, got a lot of eggs.
So you might not be able to see any eggs, but when I turn it around, if you see that glint in the back of the comb, that is nectar that is being turned into honey by the bees.
Now is a good time to talk about how honey is actually made. Now, there's 4 different resources that bees take into their hive. There's nectar, pollen, propolis, and water. Water is for those hot summer days when the bees get really thirsty. Propolis is actually tree sap, and it's usually meant for holding together, like a very powerful glue, the stuff that they don't want moving, and so sometimes they're going to seal up some of the entrance with propolis, so that's a lot harder for air drafts to get in. And so usually they use a lot more propolis during the fall months when they're sealing up the hive for the winter. Then there's pollen, which is actually more or less of a bee protein powder. That's how I like to see it. And they usually use pollen to feed to their brood, their baby bees, to quicken the growth so that they grow into big, strong, healthy bees. And honey and nectar is what is turned into honey. And, well, honey is the main source of bee food that bees are also live on, eat, and is also turned into wax. So for nectar to become honey, it's actually quite a lengthy process, all things considered, although bees found a very efficient way to do this. Now, a worker bee, a forager bee, could visit up to 5 1,000 flowers per day collecting nectar. And they're gonna take it into the hive and they're gonna share it with other bees so that that bee enzyme will get into the nectar, which I wouldn't call it bee vomit at all, but it is kind of sort of bee vomit, and they're sharing it with each other. And once there's enough enzymes in the nectar, they're gonna pour it into a cell, and then the worker bees who are staying inside the hive will flap their wings and get an airflow going through the hive. And with that airflow going through the hive, it will evaporate the water out of the honey. And once the water content is about 17.1%, that's when the bees cap off the honey, because that's pure honey right there. If there's more than 18% to 20%, I forgot exactly which one it is. If there's more than 18 to 20% water in the honey, that means it will start to ferment and turn into alcohol. And so the bees obviously don't want that. And so that's why pure honey is usually less than 17%. So honey is actually hydrophilic, which is the opposite of hydrophobic, which means that it attracts water, which is why the bees seal it off with wax, so that water doesn't get into it and the honey doesn't ferment. And so that's why you don't usually want to leave a jar of honey open for too long. Otherwise, it'll attract moisture into the honey, which will then up the water levels in the honey, which will then allow it to finally ferment. And so just keep that in mind. If you want it to ferment, just leave it open.
Yo, that's all. Capped off brood. Why not even see their larvae? Yo, and look at all that capped off brood and honey. Look at that. Look at all that. It's beautiful. Now I'll put it back. More capped off brood. A bit more mature too. Very mature. Very big too. I like to see that. Still don't know if I can get the queen out of this one. Already doesn't running out of fuel. That makes things a little bit harder, but whatever. I think they like it more without the smoke. Look at all of that. Probably not see it too well, but there's a lot going on. There's a lot of brood and honeybees. There's still that thing on the bottom. Okay, final one. This one's really heavy. What's even connected to the wall? No wonder why. Split apart some of their comb. Oh! Some of them even got pollen. There's a lot of brood. It's almost touching the floor. There's a lot of pollen. Already maturing combs. They have a lot of good stuff going on one. There's a lot of big fat ones that I can't tell. Like, that one's the queen, that one the queen, that one. There's so many big fat ones. Those very big fat butts. Like, is the queen just gonna be like 8 times larger than ever? Because like she's already very big.
about a week later, while I was doing another hive inspection and not recording it, I actually saw the queen, and I managed to get this short little shot of her, and she's the one with the really big butt.
There they are. So there's even some drones that you'll probably see on there. Yeah, there's one. It's a big fat one in the middle there. And for the queen, it's probably right there. That's her. You can mark her. She's too easy to spot. Look how fat this bee is compared to this little worker bee. This male one is huge. Almost mistook him for Casio. Kinda fat. It's also pretty lost. You shouldn't really be outside the hive at this point in time. Probably fell out during my inspection. I'll get him back in there. But first I'm going to show my sister because they have no stingers. I could just pick them up. Watch. See? No stingers. Okay, so I did a hive inspection last Friday, and I didn't record it because it was just a quick little hive inspection. I was going to the cabin with my family. We're leaving in like 30 minutes, so it's just a quick little one. Didn't bother recording anything. And so I'm out there. We're looking at the hive, the comb. There's a lot of comb. I'm probably gonna have to put on the second box today, hopefully. But I saw, but I was just looking. I wasn't even looking for the queen, but I saw her, and she was huge. So all my confusion, like I thought that the big fat bees might be like queens, and I was like, is that how big she's gonna be? It's gonna be so hard to spot her compared to all the other big guard worker bees. And so that's why I was a little bit like, worried about it, because it really seemed like it was gonna be a hard thing to hard to spot her. But no, there she was huge, very, like twice the size of any other bee in there. I saw, and there's a lot of brood, capped off brood, and I even saw some of them being born. They were clawing their way out, by nibbling their way out. And when they're born, the first thing that a bee does is turn around and clean the cell that it was in. And so I saw about 10 little bee butts sticking out of their cells because they were cleaning. They were newborn. And I even saw some newborns walking around because you could tell they're a bit more gray fuzz instead of yellow fuzz. So I am very excited for this. And I also got some thyme mite treatment. So I got this white thyme. And I got some not olive oil, coconut oil, without, as they're saying, hopefully, no additives to it. So it's just coconut oil. And so I mix those together. 3 drops of thyme oil, that's a lot. So I might just be putting it into corners, and I'll be wiping the bottom board with it, so any mice that fall on it might just die because it's not a sticky board, it's just a bottom board. So that's what I'll be doing today. I'll be doing a hive inspection, maybe marking the queen. I could actually, if I spot her again, I'll probably end up doing it because I actually am able to do it this time. It's finally sunny out. It was raining all day, but it stopped raining for like 3 hours ago, and the sun came out, and now everything's like almost dry again. There's a couple clouds around, but everything's blue skies, and everything seems like it should be fine. If it starts raining again randomly, that would be pretty sucky, but I have confidence for some reason that that won't happen this time. Okay, I'm gonna take this outside. Goodbye. section. I'm pretty excited because last time there was tons of brood. The hive is getting stronger, and then I started feeding them. And so they seem to be doing really well. Right about now, I got the smoker ready. I got all my tools up there. And so I'm pretty excited. Seems like they're gonna be really strong and ready for the winter. I got wintering stuff coming in with insulation and all that sorts of stuff. So things seem to be going pretty well. Well, here it is, open up. So I smoked all the bees down into the hive. Look at you, brave little one. Look at all this honey, capped off honey. There's also some on this side. But this is really good. I'm very happy. I also saw some pollen on some other frames, but not on this one. I just finished the first box, the top one. There's a decent amount of honey. I'm definitely gonna have to feed them more. So I'm just gonna be constantly feeding them until winter, and then I'm probably gonna be slowly feeding them. And then there's no eggs, a little bit of pollen, and I'm guessing all that's gonna be on the lower box. So.
So after the bees filled out almost the entire first brood box full of honeycomb, I decided to put on the second brood box so that the bees could have more room and fill that out and everything would be great. And I was super excited for this. I put it on and the bees don't touch it. And so I was wondering, why aren't the bees touching this second brood box? There's so much more room. They should be building comb on it by now. It's been like 2 weeks and the main nectar flow is going on. And so like I want them to fill this out so I can put a honey super on top. That would be my next goal. And so I decided to talk to the beekeeper who taught me the bee course on what I should do. And he just told me to put some of the frames on the bottom brood box, in the second brood box, and switch them out so that the bees would be encouraged to build on the top brood box. And so I did that, and it actually worked. And the bees started building tons of comb up there. But because I had no foundation in the top, the bees built very messy comb, which either means that it was against the frames. So if the frames were put in this way, then they built it this way. Or they would just build very fat pieces of comb on one frame and then no comb on the other frames. So when I would pull out this piece of comb, because it's this thick and the frame is only this big, it would rip itself apart against the other 2 pieces of wood. And so this caused quite a few problems, like flooding the hive in honey, so much to the point where the bees evacuated the hive for like about 2 days, maybe even 3. And the only reason why they went back inside is because I encouraged them and coaxed them to get back inside. And also there was a storm coming, and so they had to. Otherwise they would have gone wet outside and all died. But this was such a big mistake on my end. This is like when everything was going downhill. And so now I have a ton of messy comb. The bees finally went back inside and started cleaning it up, but I didn't really know what to do. And about at the same time as I did put the second box on top, the queen disappeared. I probably squished her, to be honest, because I had big gloves on and I wasn't being that careful with removing and putting back in frames. So I probably squished her or rolled her, or probably killed her. I don't think she flew off, and she seemed very healthy. I don't think the worker bees killed her because she was doing a bad job at laying eggs. And so I'm probably gonna just take the blame for this one because I think it was my fault. But we have this problem now of no queen and messy comb. And so I talked to, and during this entire time, I'm working at a Bible camp. And so I'm at camp, cat and leading, for 5 days a week, and I'm only home on the weekends, which works out pretty well because this is when I learned that you only want to check on the hive every 14 to 16 days instead of every 5 to 10 days like it was. That's not really a good idea. And so it ended up working out in that sense, but it didn't work out in the sense where at that point I'm doing laundry and trying to figure out and relaxing for next week. And it's been pretty hard to set up scheduling so that I could actually do my beekeeping during the weekends. And so I was asking one of my friends who did the course with me, and she told me that I should just talk to the person who taught us the course again and ask for his help, because he also has a lot of beehives, and so I might be able to buy some frames or the queen off of him and get some advice on, and maybe buy some frames off of him that are nice comb to put into the hive. And so I do, and I call him up, and he's really passionate to actually help me. He wants to see me to succeed along with the other beekeepers that he taught. And so he gives me about like $100 worth of free frames full of honeycomb, full of bees. He puts them in a nuke and gives them to me. And he gives me not bred queens, but he gives me frames with queen cells on them that were just ready to hatch. And so I can't thank him enough for this, honestly. My bees would be dead right now, and I wouldn't have any bees in my backyard right now if it wasn't for what he did and gave to me for free, no payment. And so I still appreciate that a lot.
I feel like it would be a really good time to talk about what bees do when their queen dies. The neat thing is that they could actually replace her, and so they'll take a bee larvae, and feed her only royal jelly. And then after they cap her over with a queen cell cap, she'll grow into a queen, and when she hatches, she'll go around, kill all the other queen cells if she has the venom to do so, and then go on her mating flights, and then come back to the hive, and after her mating flights, she'll have all the sperm she needs to last the next 2 to 5 years. And so she won't never have to go on one of those again. And so after my old queen died, I destroyed all the other queen cells so that to prevent swarming, and then I left one alive, and she did hatch, but after that she went on her mating flights and she never came back. She probably got hit by a car or something like that, which really just sucks, because I actually was preventing no queen situation, but it happened anyways.
So after he gave me the new, which is kind of like a miniature hive with the 4 frames in it, with tons of bees and tons of brood on it, because my bee population went down because it's been like a month since they had the queen, and like a month and a half, because this is like later in summer. This is sometimes in August. And so as I'm moving the frames with the queen cells into the brood box, I noticed that the queen cells have hatched. And so on the drive from his place to my place, the queen cells hatched, and so now I have 2 virgin queens in my hive, and they went out on their breeding flights, and wouldn't you know it, in about in 2 weeks, when I finally check on the hive again, there is brood.
Check all that out. There's so much of it. Yes. Oh, thank God. Thank you, Jesus. Yes. Oh. Look at it all. Look at it all. There's so much. Thank you, Jesus. Okay, putting in the treatment for mites. This is the second dose that they are receiving in a while. Not that they have brood again. That's the main reason why I'm putting it in, so that they'll be okay for the winter and for the fall. So that by the time they go into the winter, they should be there should be a very low amount of mites. I'm gonna put that all in now without killing any bees.
This was such a sigh of relief, because now I have a queen again, and it's been a month and a half. You have no idea the amount of relief I felt when I saw those eggs, when I saw that brood. and there is so much of it too. Now, I don't know if I have 2 queens at the moment or just 1. I'll figure that out next year in the spring. Hopefully they don't swarm if they have 2. Now, because I removed a lot of the messy comb, which had like tons of honey, pounds of honey, tons of honey, I had to start feeding the bees again because I also put in some empty frames that were fairly empty of honey, and some of them were just empty of honeycomb. So I had to put in, and so I started feeding my bees again very early in the fall and in the late summer, so that the bees could just get their honey stores for the winter. And I also fed back the old honey to the bees by putting it just kind of out front by the hive, and they were all over it. And it's like they acted like this honey was never in their hive before, and it's like, oh my gosh, look at all this honey, we gotta move into the hive, girls, woohoo. And so yeah, that worked out pretty well, and so I'm pretty happy with how all that worked out. And at this point, everything's great again. Everything's moving along just fine, and winter's coming in a lot faster than I'm ready for. And so now we're gonna have to talk about that next. So finally, winter rolled around, and it snuck up on me a lot faster than I was ready for. But happily, it was a warmer winter, all things considered, and so I was quite lucky in that regard. So I did end up buying a bee cozy, a bee blanket that is meant to reflect most of the heat back into the hive. And I also put in a lot of blankets into the hive. So there's the main brood box, and then I have the inner roof cover, or one of them. I made a second one. And then I put all the blankets here, and then there's the roof on top. But, and it's inside 2 honey supers. Now, there was a problem with that, is that it does absorb moisture, and when things get wet, it's really like, it just absorbs heat, and that's it. And so I had to actually work around this, and so what I did is that I took all the stuff out, threw it in the dryer. It wasn't that wet, but it started to get wet, and then I put it in a plastic bag, vacuum sealed it, and then I put it back into the hive, and I added even more blankets. I added an entire sleeping bag actually into the bag, and so that all worked out pretty well, all things considered. Another mistake I made was also trying to put towels underneath the reflecting bee cozy, and then pretty early on I also noticed that those would also get wet, and it would also cause the same problem. And so I removed those, and I put some hay bales in plastic bags so that they won't rot by next summer, and I also put those around it more as a wind blocker. But I also heard that beekeepers sometimes use hay bales as insulation. And so far it's January now, it's 2025, and the bees are still nice and cozy in their hive. They're still alive, and I just threw on some feed on there today. So this is an old photo of the hive.
Got tons of padding in the quilt box, which is just 2 of these. That's pretty nice. There's some food in there, and to keep it warm so that they do not freeze to death. There's the food. I can open up too much until a few days later.
And of like the first time I insulated it, you can see the blankets, and here is the hive now. Slight difference overall, but in the end it is now working out, and we passed December. Yeah, things are warming up. It is quite early for things to be warming up as fast as they are. I think we're gonna hit another cold snap before things actually warm up for the spring. Other than that, things are going well, and the bees are doing great actually. Now, one of my friends who I did the bee course with told me of a different way to insulate the hives. So there's the main way most people usually insulate their hives for the winter, is that you put bee cozies around it, which keeps the inside of the hive warm. But the thing is that when bees drink honey and expel breath, there's moisture in the air, and moisture will build up at the top and then drip back down on the bees as cold water, which will kill the bees in the hive. That is what kills the bees mostly when it comes to the cold killing them. It's usually moisture dripping down on them instead of the actual cold outside. And so what most beekeepers do is that they leave an entrance at the bottom open and an entrance at the top open so that it could vent out all the excess moisture in the air. Now the problem with that, as you can see, is that it's letting cold air in and hot air with moisture out. And so my friend, who also did the course with me, suggested that I do a condensing hive. The first hive I talked about was a ventilating hive. This hive is a condensing hive, where you don't have any top entrance open, and you just have a lot of insulation on top, a lot of it. And so this will keep the hive warm, and so the bees will eat less honey and create less moisture. And the key thing is that you have one side of the hive that has a lot less insulation than the others, so that all the condensation builds up along that wall in particular that is out of the way, and you'll usually have it so that it drips out the hive. And that's what I did, and that's what bees do in nature. They live in hollowed trees, and there's an infinite amount of insulation above them, along with a lot on the sides. And so I'm trying it, and it's working really well. And I heard that it actually works out a lot better than a ventilating hive, as long as you have enough R's on top. R's mean R value is amount of heat that it keeps in. And so you need about 40 R's, and I have about 40 or more R's if I had to take a lucky guess.
So it's kind of a mess up here. I've been taking the treehouse down. Rest in peace, you have served me well. And there is a lot of dead bees outside. All things considered, it does look like an absolute massacre. And I have to keep clearing them out. There is still tons. But other than that, that's just normal, just so you know. As the bee shivers, still die throughout the winter. I still think I have a lot of population left. Keyword think. Once again, we'll see next spring when I open up the hive. But here's the hay bales that are covered so that they don't start rotting, or at least rotting that much. Here's the cozy. Here's the upper entrance that I covered with just this by just putting it there, and so it doesn't really affect the bees. This is the less insulated side, and this is on top just to prevent wind, and also there's a lot of insulation in there, and so it kind of packs it down. So yeah.
The main benefit of having a condensing hive is that because the inside of the hive is a lot warmer now, because there isn't any cold air being drafted in, now the hive has the added benefit of not having to have the bees shiver and go through a lot of food throughout the winter and always be trying to warm up the hive balled up. And so now the hive and so it's a lot easier on the bees throughout the winter, and it's a lot less stressful. And so come next spring, the bees come out of the winter a lot stronger, with a lot more of their population, and with still quite a bit of food stores. And so that could also help with starting honey production early. And so that's the hope. We'll see what happens next year. Well, I guess to sum it all up, I watched a YouTube video of a guy named Alex keeping bees for his first time. And you should really check out his channel after this. And after that, I thought, wow, that's so cool. I wish I could do beekeeping. Sadly, I'm not an adult yet, so I probably can't. And then I thought about it a bit more, and it's like, why can't I do it again? There's nothing actually stopping me. And so I liked the idea a lot. I ran it by my parents, and they supported the idea. So they also gave me a loan because I didn't really have the funds to pay for all the equipment yet. So thank you, Mom. Thank you, Papa. And so I made it my goal for the spring of 2024 to have bees in my backyard. And so I took a little beekeeping course. And I passed it. Introductory beekeeping. Pretty simple. But that was a really fun course. Equipped me with tons of knowledge. And after that, I was feeling pretty confident and actually going into this. So I bought the beehive boxes. I bought the frames. Put the frames together. No foundation. That sucked later on. And but putting the frames together was really fun. And after that, put it all together up in my treehouse and bought the bees. They came in a cardboard tube, and I dumped them into the box, and boom, I had bees in my backyard. First goal done. There you go. And so my next goal was to get the second brood box on top, because once I have 2 brood boxes, they would be fully settled in, and that's tons of room for honey, tons of room for eggs to be laid, and so that would be all for the bees, just so that I could really fortify the health of the hive. And so to do this, I just had to take care of the first box until all the frames were full of honeycomb. And so I did the regular inspections every 5 to 10 days. Later I learned that I should only be doing them every 14 to 16 days. But I looked at the frames. There was tons of eggs. The honeycomb was built a lot faster than I thought they would. The bees are really efficient and quick with building honeycomb. And I even saw the queen at one point during this stage. And so everything seemed to be going great. And it was going so fast that I actually got to put on the second brood box quite quickly. There you go, I got that done. The nectar flow seemed to be coming up in about 2 weeks. The main nectar flow, where most beekeepers make most of their honey. So I thought maybe I'll actually be able to get a honey harvest this year. And so I put the second brood box on top, and the bees did not touch it for 2 weeks straight. And so the main nectar flow was going through, the season was passing, and I was wondering why they aren't touching the second brood box, because I can't put on honey super until they're done with the second brood box, or mostly done. So I asked the guy who taught me the beekeeping course what I should do, and he told me to move some frames from the bottom into the top so that the bees actually understand that there's frames up there, and switch the empty ones to the bottom so that the bees pre-fill the ones down there. And so I did that, and it actually worked great. The bees built tons of honeycomb really fast. But there's a but. No, it's not a bumblebee. The bees built very messy comb, and so that means when I would pull out a frame, it would wreck the honeycomb against other frame pieces or other honeycomb pieces, and so this could cause damage to the brood, and it could spill a lot of honey, which it did. A few inspections later, when I pulled out some of the bigger frames with a lot of messy honeycomb, it spilled so much honey into the hive that, because I wasn't careful, that the bees actually had to evacuate the hive for like 3 days straight. And the only reason why they went back inside is because, well, I was coaxing them back in there, and there was also a storm coming in, and so they kind of had to go back inside. And this really sucked. But that's not all. I was also checking on the bottom brood box, where everything was mostly fine, but it appears the queen has died. I probably squished her. This happened about a few weeks before the messy frame and the honey spill. It happened around the time I put on the second brood box. It's probably because I had the big fat gloves on, so I was putting the frames back in and taking them out very haphazardly, and so I probably squished her at some point, which really sucks. And so now my bee population is going down, and there's still some messy comb. And so I asked a friend of mine who did the beekeeping course with me what I should do, and she told me that it'd probably be best if I actually contacted the man who taught us the beekeeping course. Now, this was also happening while I was working at Bible camp, which was fun and all, but I was usually gone for 5 days of the week and only back for 2. And during the first day, I'd be doing laundry and relaxing, and then on the second day, I would have a bit more time and would usually end up doing a beehive inspection, because every 14 days is every 2 weeks. So it worked out in that sense pretty well. But during that time, I contacted the man who taught us the beekeeping course, and he wanted to help me. And so I was thinking, I'll buy some stuff off of him. I'll probably buy a queen off of him, and maybe some extra frames to put into my hive that didn't have messy comb on them. And so I went to his place, and he gave me many frames that had nice honeycomb on them that were empty for queens to lay in. And he gave me some frames with bees on them, some frames with brood on them, and some frames with eggs on them. And he also gave me, most importantly, a frame that had 2 queen cells on them that were just ready to hatch. And greatest part is he gave it to me all for free. I'm still thankful to this day for his contribution. My bees would probably be dead by now if it wasn't for what he did there. And so I greatly appreciated that. And so he put the frames in a nuke, gave them to me. I got them back home, and on the way back home, these queen cells actually hatched. And so I had 2 queens on these frames, and I put them into the hive. And 2 weeks later, when I finally checked back up on them, there was brood and eggs everywhere.
Look at it all. Look at it all. There's so much. Thank you, Jesus.
That means the queen went on a successful mating flight, which my last queen didn't. She hatched out of her queen cell, went on her mating flights, and never came back, and probably got hit by a car when I did try to replace the old one. So that's why I didn't get a replacer earlier. So at this point, it's late into August. I missed the main nectar flow. I didn't get any honey harvest this year, but that's fine with me because I still have a living beehive, and if I could get the beehive to survive till next year, that means it'll be a very strong hive ready for next year to make an even larger honey harvest than I would have had this year if I were to just let them die and take the honey that they did have. And it would also be a lot cheaper because a package of bees is about $300. And so now it was all about winterizing the hive. And at first I struggled a bit with this concept because I didn't know exactly what I should be doing. And so I made a makeshift quilt box, which was working at, would technically would have worked as a quilt box was intended to, except for the fact that I had a lot of exposed blankets in and around the hive, which would have absorbed moisture and cooled off the hive actually, instead of keeping it warm. And so after that, I took the blankets and put them inside an airtight plastic bag so that they wouldn't get wet, so that they would actually properly insulate. I put some hay bales around the hive to be more of wind blockers, and I also heard that other beekeepers use them as their primary source of insulation too. And pretty early on in the winter, I learned the difference between a condensing hive and a ventilating hive. And the difference being that a condensing hive would be how bees naturally hibernate during the winter, and the bees can come out a lot stronger if it works out, but you need a lot more insulation technically. And ventilating hive is to vent out all the excess moisture, which would kill the bees, but because the bees aren't creating so much moisture, because the hive is inherently warmer in this sense, because it isn't being ventilated, it actually works out in the end. But key thing is that you have to have one wall that's colder than all the other walls, so that all the condensation piles up there and not above the bees, so that the bees don't have to get wet, and so they can drink the water on the hive walls. Christmas of 2024 came and went along with the year, and so now we're in 2025, and I just recently checked up on the bees, and they're still alive, and they seem to actually be doing very well so far. I just threw some feed on there not so long ago. And so that was my year of beekeeping. Now, what did I learn for next year? I learned that budgeting, you can do it, but you gotta be actually really smart to be able to do it properly, because especially don't budget on frames, so you don't have messy honeycomb. Or more specifically, you gotta have foundation on the combs, or some sort of foundation. And so those were the 2 big things I learned, and I've already been putting them into fruition. Also, make sure that they faced, and to avoid the northern wind straight into the entrance, don't face them south, face them east towards sunrise. Oh, and also be a lot more careful when when moving frames in and out of the hive. That's probably the biggest thing that I learned this year, other than the messy comb. And so those were the big things that I learned this year, and will be obviously using in the next year to make sure that, in hopes to get an actual honey harvest next year. And that's all I really have to say. And so, if all goes well, I'll be talking to you guys next year about my second year beekeeping and my first honey harvest. Well, that's all for this year. God bless you. Talk to you guys later.
You